Hey everybody, this is Perch. This is a letter reaction to one of the videos, and the video was called "We're in a hole and we need to dig out," which is basically it's funny since that video came out, have heard kind of a number of things around quite a few companies. Boom, certainly Dynamite, Antarctic, Titan, American Mythology. A lot of companies in just deep, feel like things are in a deeper amount of trouble. And rumors are that they're rumors. Certainly, there's people who say I haven't been paid. Are there cases where people say that and they're jumping the gun a little bit? They haven't even hit kind of the due date for their payment. Sure, that does happen. And I think comics has relied on that a lot by saying, hey, we haven't stiffed anybody yet. We just this person fell through the cracks. So the money's good. The money's coming right to you, and it does. But it's also a smokescreen. It's the several comic companies have taken the approach of, promise our creators something, don't pay them, wait for them to complain, then pay them. And it just buys you a couple weeks or months of cash flow, and sometimes longer because creators forget that they are owed money, especially when it comes to royalties. Most creators remember the first payment. Many creators, and I've talked to some artists about this, and they always think I've got a hole in my head when I say it, because it happens to be that the people who are more drawn to me tend to actually track, what they're owed, like a normal person. But it is there's a lot of cases like this, and yes, some of them could be innocent, some of them are not. But comics as a whole has more or less kind of relied on the nah, nothing to see here approach for way longer than it should have. And as a result, and this is kind of the point in that video, it's no longer okay for us to just kind of pretend there's not a problem and just say, hey, I occasional things here or there, and small companies. No, comic sales are down consistently across the board. And by the way, a couple of you wrote and said, I'm enjoying more comics than ever. Cool, that's good. Okay, saying the comic industry is down is not an attack on your character, your buying habits. If you're buying more comics, great. In any downturn, there are some people who go in more. But across the board, things are unhealthy. We are in a hole. So let me read this mail to you, and then we'll talk about it a little further. It says, Dear Perch, I've been pondering your recent video. We're in a hole and need to dig out, and have some thoughts about it. First off, it's clear none of the editorial at Marvel really care right now about the books they're putting out. The fact there's so many solo X titles that are just destined to have only 10 to 12 issues runs is a testament to that. I've said this before, and I will say this before. I think I've said this before, and I'll say this again. Marvel's thinking in the short run. They are thinking about making sure they are putting out stuff right now and not stuff that have an afterlife in trades. Make sure you're putting out stuff that you can sell later, as well as not have stuff that's just to pad the line. Manga is successful in the US, and those are the series that were popular enough in magazines like Weekly Shonen Jump or Weekly Shonen Sunday to be able to have that afterlife in collections overseas. And it's worth saying, by the way, from my standpoint, a lot of people are like every manga printed makes money. No, many of them fail. But the ones that fail don't get reprinted, don't get collected, and don't make their way to the US. So if you're sitting in the US, they're like, all these manga series seem like bangers that just sell lots of copies. Yeah, they this is you're seeing the top 20%. Maybe even a little generous, but you're seeing the top 20% in the US. You're not seeing the other 80%. Now, that doesn't mean they're not doing things right. Clearly, they are doing things right. But you are seeing the best of the best, and that's one of the areas that are just it's a little bit of a different story. Anyway, back to the mail. It says, like you said in the video, Marvel and DC needs to be damn sure the titles they're putting out can run for at least 50 to 100 issues with no relaunches or the crap. In fact, the Moon Knight was relaunched twice with the same creative team in less than a year, something Marvel should be ashamed of. Wrapping up, I don't think Hush 2 is going to do as well as DC is hoping it will. The interest just isn't there, nor, for that matter, Kelly's Amazing Spider-Man relaunch. Two ways to further instill trust that Marvel and DC are putting out books they intend to run 50 plus issues would be to have the interior artist also be the cover artist and getting rid of variant covers. Well, that's all I've got for thought. Thank you very much. I think, look, there's a lot of things that that have gone on in comics and continue to go on in comics. And at the end of the day, uh, the systemic problem that comics have is that it's not sustainable to operate the business this way. It's just not. And I think people. What's funny is many of the creators, many people know it. What's odd is the parts of the internet were like the comics, mainstream comics are dead, mainstream comics are dying, Marvel and DC are dying. You want to know the crazy thing about that comment? The comment that mainstream comics are dying. The people who say as close to that, I mean, almost the exact same thing, are a lot of the creators in comics who seem to, in a lot of cases, and editorial, by the way, have kind of a fatalistic view of where their comic industry, where their business is going. You will hear people from within Marvel and DC, or creators for both, say things like, yeah, it's slowly trickling away. Yeah, it's slowly dying. You will hear a lot more on the negative end of things than the positive end of things. It's, many of you get irritated when I say, look, things are cyclical, and the odds are that mainstream comics, Marvel, will increase sales again. So will DC. There's been ups and downs. If you look back over 50, 60 years, there have been ups and downs in comics, and there will be again. This isn't me being a, Pollyanna optimist. It's history. It's literally history. That's what tends to happen to comics. They have ups and they have downs. However, if you look at a lot of people inside of comics, actual comic creators, and I'm not talking about people doing crowdfunding indie work who are maybe disgruntled at the former companies they worked for. I'm talking about people in those companies today. The viewpoint on comics is a lot more negative than positive. It is not, that, hey, we're a downturn, but a couple smart decisions, some good business moves, we can dominate again. There's nobody who's predicting kind of the return to ubiquitous comics in the newsstand, hundreds of thousands of comics. People just don't ever predict that comics can one day be selling 100,000, 200,000 copies regularly, many of them, not just occasional ones, not just number one issues, not just stunts, but regularly. To his defense, I think Scott Snyder will claim that, and I think he believes it. But he is definitely in the minority of people who believe that the comic industry actually will be healthy again. And think about that for a minute. It's weird that they don't, because data and history, and frankly, just looking at manga, a lot of what comics have been since the 60s and the 70s is they copy things that work. I mean, and that's not, by the way, that's not insulting them. Jim Shooter was very good at studying business models, finding things that would work, and then replicating it. And he was unashamed. You've heard him in interviews say things like I didn't invent this. I just was smart enough to do what was working. And that's a sign of intelligence. People get wrapped up with the well, you have to be the first one to invent things. No, you don't. No, you just need to follow the formula. But anyway, if you look at how well manga has done, and you look at how you've got tankobon versions in the big in the Walmarts and Targets and in the dollar store for that matter. If you look at that, you go, it's only a matter of time before somebody in mainstream U.S. comics, Marvel and DC, pulls their head out of their ass and just copies this. And DC gets halfway there. They've got the little tankobon style books. They're good. They're well priced. I bought All-Star Superman recently for a friend, $9. The series looks good. I don't like reading it that small. It's annoying to me because I really like the Frank Quitely art. So to see it kind of downscaled, that part's tough. And so they're halfway there. They're putting out the right material. The part that's not working is you do not, I got it in a comic store, which is good. I should be able to get it from a comic store, but I want to get it. I want to get it at the airport. I want to get it, everywhere. I want to see that sitting in a gas station. Not that I go into gas stations anymore, but I want to see what all this stuff. It needs to be more places, but they got this. Odds are the comic industry will get healthier. But it is troubling that and again, one of the kind of humorous parts that I see to comics right now is some of the biggest detractors on the internet who are like, Marvel's dead. It's a corpse walking. And then you talk to an editor at Marvel and it's like, yeah, I mean, people don't want comics anymore. We're probably going to be lucky if we consistently sell on average across the entire line 50,000 copies. Those statements aren't that different at all. And I mean, it's like the people within comics, within these companies, have about as much confidence and faith that things are going to get better as the people who just want to burn it all down. And if there's one thing you can say about business, it's that typically, if you don't have a visionary, if you don't have somebody with faith, if you don't have somebody who's kind of pointing up at the sky and calling their shots, then yeah, it's real hard to accomplish that. Really hard. But anyway, I think to the point of kind of the comics in a hole it needs to dig out, it just takes a couple people, but there are some people who have to say, like, guys, we need to stop going down. Like we're stop digging to the bottom. We need to actually start taking steps upward. And a lot of those are not genius moves; they're just very fundamental moves. Like I said, DC needs to start selling those little Tonkabon style books that they have of their collections in more places. It's an attractive offering. It's got the right price point. Looks okay. They've got kind of their top stories. They've got Hush in that format. Get it some places. They've got the right material now. Go for it. Marvel needs to do the same thing. I mean, before the the MCU, I mean, I'd have the Infinity Gauntlet, and I'd have that some of Hickman's Avengers run. I have some classic Spider-Man runs. I'd have that in those books and off and going. But I've got to get them in lots of places. And to your point, Marvel does seem lost. It's in a malaise of just, they're putting out books. The energy is not there. Even announcements they made, which 5-10 years ago would have at least moved some kind of needle. It's not there. The buzz around One World Under Doom is as close to zero as it can get, and this is actually a legitimate big Marvel villain in a big crossover with some decent art that they've been building to for a while. Like there's, and Doom hasn't been overused over the last 5-10 years either. He's, the last time we really saw him front and center in a more major way was Hickman's Secret Wars. That was almost 10 years ago. So, it's like, this should be absolutely, banging the door down, and it's not DOA, but it's very quiet, spookily quiet. Anyway, I'm glad that video touched a nerve with some people in a good way. And like I said, kind of at the beginning, one of the first steps to success is admitting you have a problem. And with, since I did that video, the news, the rumblings, the text messages, and I'm just overwhelmed at this point. I mean, I've got so many people who have called me and texted me, and they're like, the news is worse. It's significantly worse over the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whenever I record that video, close to a month ago, I think. It hasn't got better, but there still is this desire to cover it up to some extent, to go, well, I'm sure it's, and there's two versions of this. One, and there's a major difference between them. One is to say, hey, the possibility is it can get better. We know this because history shows us that it can get better. We have to take steps to do that, but, hope is not lost. We can do it better. There's a major difference between saying that and saying, what? There's no problem. Everything's fine. I think some of you sometimes get confused when I say these things in the videos, when I say that, yeah, history shows us that comics are cyclical and the business will go up. I feel like I don't have to add the disclaimer, but I guess I'll start. Of course, it will not go up unless action is taken. What I'm saying is that the door is unlocked, and all you have to do is open it up and go through it. But, if you don't, we're going to be stuck in this limbo for a long time. Again, what history suggests is at some point, smart people go, hey, you know what? I'm tired of wondering where my next paycheck is, and we've got these characters that are known around the world with kind of billion-dollar companies behind them. I'm actually tired of sucking. So you know what? Fuck that. We're going to actually make some money. That day will come. I think the question for all of us is how long do we get to drag this out? Like how
how far is this going to go before, that hero, that person steps up? Again, if you're the editorial of Marvel, if you're in the leadership of Marvel, and you're looking at kind of both the early sales numbers from what I've been told and the buzz around the Doom series, fuck, man, you have to be. I mean, there's several people there who have stated pretty openly that they plan to retire at Marvel. Like, my goal is to just make comics and then be done working. Yeah, you better get your ass in gear, pal, because that plan is not. You're not going to make it. Anyway, thanks for listening.